The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I talk about media skepticism and media literacy and sort of learning to be informed and critical consumers of media messages all the time. And sometimes it's just genuinely difficult to figure out whether what we're being told is coming from an expert or a corporation or how money might be influencing the messages that we hear. I'll tell you one story, which is absolutely horrifying. Back in 2015, Henry Miller, who's a fellow at the Hoover Institution, that's an institution at Stanford University in California, top educational institution in the country. Miller wrote an editorial in Forbes.com. Okay, wrote an editorial. His name appears on it. He claims it as his own. He's an expert. Right. We can trust what it says. Well, what did it say? This editorial in Forbes.com said that glyphosate had just been classified as a probable cancer-causing substance, and that that's bad. In other words, Miller disagreed with the classification by the World Health Organization of glyphosate as a possible carcinogen. Henry Miller wrote the piece in Forbes, attacked the decision, said it's a bad decision. We shouldn't be classifying glyphosate as a carcinogen. Okay, a couple years go by. The Monsanto papers have now been released, and that includes emails, correspondence between Monsanto, agribusiness giant Monsanto, and Henry Miller. And it turns out that Monsanto actually wrote the entire piece that Henry Miller put his name on. And Henry Miller added a few words to it before it was published. And the email chain is so disgusting that it really makes your skin crawl. The emails show that Monsanto went to Miller and they said, hey, would you be willing to write about the International Agency for Research on Cancer saying that glyphosate is a carcinogen? And he wrote back saying, I would be if I could start from a high quality draft. I'm absolutely inundated with projects right now. What is he saying? He is saying, hey, Monsanto, I'll say what you want me to say, as long as you're really writing most of it, because I'm really, really busy right now. Now, why would Monsanto care about glyphosate? Well, they have herbicides that use glyphosate, period, right? I mean, that full stop, that's why Monsanto would care about this. And within a few days of that exchange by email, Monsanto sent Miller a draft. And the draft is available, and you would notice that the draft is almost identical to what was eventually published in Forbes under the name Henry Miller. Miller was contacted by CBS San Francisco to comment on this, didn't respond. In a statement provided by Monsanto, Scott Partridge, who's the company's vice president of global strategy, said, quote, that was a collaborative effort, a function of the outrage we were hearing from many people, the infamous many people, on the attacks on glyphosate. This is not a scientific peer-reviewed journal. It's an op-ed we collaborated with him on. So it's true. It's not a scientific peer-reviewed journal. It's Forbes.com. But even still, it was never disclosed that it was a collaborative effort. It was published under Henry Miller's name, implicitly based on his personal expertise in the subject matter as a fellow of this institution at Harvard. So basically, at this point, what do we need to do as media consumers, particularly of science news? Even articles by scientists in popular publications need to be looked at very skeptically. Science writing should be looked at in peer-reviewed journals. That is sort of the idea that we should all have in our minds. But the problem is, even articles written about peer-reviewed journal studies need to be approached cautiously. It is very common that you'll read something in Forbes or any online publication, and it'll appear legit because it cites a peer-reviewed journal, PLOS One or the Journal of Biochemistry, whatever. So we assume, oh, well, it's based on good research that was done. Many times, the headline and even the summary of what a peer-reviewed study found is not actually accurate. It will not actually appear in the peer-reviewed study if you go and look at it. And then the truth is, even if every single time you say, you know what, I'm not going to listen to what Forbes says about the peer-reviewed study, I'm going to pull up the peer-reviewed study myself and look at it. There are also problems with peer-reviewed science at this point. You can still look at peer-reviewed science and come away believing things that are inaccurate. There's a big problem right now with bad science slipping by, even in peer-reviewed journals. We just told you about this. We hear about 97% of papers on climate science say it's human-caused. 3% say it isn't. A study was done of that 3% that says climate change is not human-caused. There were major, just fundamental methodological flaws in that 3%. So sadly, I wish I had better news for you. What I can suggest is critically analyze primary sources. That's number one. I call that CAPS. I'm actually giving a speech in a couple of weeks at a college about media literacy. CAPS, critically analyze primary sources, number one, and then try to get corroborating sources as well, because sadly, even within the world of peer-reviewed journal science, there are things that are not good that are getting in there. Back to our story. Really smart scientist, right, believes glyphosate isn't carcinogenic, or is it Monsanto believes glyphosate, which they have a financial interest in, isn't carcinogenic, and they want to get some scientists to sign off on it? Vile, absolutely vile stuff. It's been a while since I did a book recommendation, and it's mostly just because we've been insanely busy with stories and the show, etc. We ended up having a couple extra minutes today, so I do want to give you a recommendation. Now, this is not the normal type of thing I would recommend. I'm recommending to you the book The Vital Question by Nick Lane. I came across this book because it was recommended by Bill Gates. Bill Gates, every once in a while, will put out a list of books he's reading. Bill Gates, known for reading a lot, as is Warren Buffett, as are many of these rich guys who make an effort to have sort of a wide educational background. And I got the book. The concept of the book is to sort of explore how complex life evolved on Earth. So it is a book about evolution in the sense that evolution is sort of operating in terms of life on Earth, but it's not really a book about evolution specifically. It's actually a book about whether it's oxygen or energy or the role that different aspects of our natural world played in allowing life to develop on Earth as it did. So I heard about the topic and I heard the recommendation from Bill Gates and I thought, fantastic, I'm going to get the book. It is endlessly interesting, but it is more rigorous as far as science books, popular science books go. I am not a scientist, and I clearly never pretend to be one, but this is actually relatively advanced. And I know that there are people in the audience who are really advanced in science, and they will tell me, David, The Vital Question is written for really lay people. And I will say, then I am not as well versed in science as a layperson, because it actually is a pretty... We talk about deep dives. This goes really quite deep into multicellular organisms and eukaryotes and all of this different stuff. Definitely much harder science than I'm used to, but it's been an interesting experience to just sort of struggle through it. I will look up, if I straight up see a term that I don't know and it's not being defined in the book, I sort of get the impression that I should just know what that means, and I will look it up and sort of struggle through it. Enjoyed it. More difficult than I anticipated, but I still highly recommend it. And if you've not been aware of my recommendations, I recommend everything from books to documentaries, nonfiction and fiction books, websites, internet newsletters. I've recommended all sorts of stuff, and you can find a list at davidpakman.com/recommendations. And by the way, you don't have to do this, but if you use the links at davidpakman.com/recommendation to make purchases of anything you see there, the show gets a little bit of a kickback, all right? So very, very exciting stuff. We have a fantastic program for you today. Next, we will be taking phone calls. There are lots of people who want to weigh in on the news of the week, the news of the day. We will answer audience questions close to the end of the show. And then we've got a tremendous bonus show for you today. How much time are you spending waiting for the subway in New York City? There's a new initiative for the MTA to actually sort of quantify the amount of delays and problems with the subway. Wish we had that when I lived in New York City. We also have received some of the first images from this Russian cannibal couple. There's a Russian couple that are cannibals, were cannibals. And it's absolutely vile and disgusting in every way. And I just hate cannibalism stuff, but we will talk about it a little bit on the bonus show. And also, Uber continues having more and more problems. I think one of the first moments where they started having some PR issues sort of at the national level, beyond just the fact that their workers really don't get paid well and are independent contractors rather than employees, was around the entire travel ban, New York City JFK airport yellow cab boycott, to call it something that's not particularly concise. That was a major negative national story for Uber. And they've since been kicked out of a number of cities. And now even New York is evaluating what they want to do with Uber. So all of those stories and more on the bonus show. Sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. And of course, please follow me on Twitter. I'm on Twitter. I love getting tweets from the audience, whether they are positive or negative. And as you know, most of them are actually negative. But anyway, you can find me on Twitter at dpakman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Jill Downs. Jill, thank you. I really appreciate you signing up at davidpakman.com, supporting the show. We depend on your support, and I really appreciate everybody who's active members. You can also support via Patreon at patreon.com/davidpakmanshow. And never forget, if you shop on Amazon, I'm not telling you have to shop on Amazon. I'm just saying if you do, you can redirect anywhere from 4 to 8% of your purchase to us by first going to davidpakman.com/Amazon before you shop. Let's go to the phones. A lot of people holding. A lot of people want to check in today. 617-830-4750 is the number. We're going to start with our caller from the 571 area code. Caller from 571, say hello. Tell us who you are and what's on your mind today.
Hello, David. How you doing? My name is Robert.
Did you say your name is Robert? It's very, very windy and tough to hear you. Try to speak up if you can.
My name is Grover.
Grover. Oh, okay, Grover. What's going on?
I have a question. Why don't you guys, if you know Philip DeFranco, Secular Talk, since I know about the about the videos that you are not getting money from it,
yeah.
Why don't you guys create an app or kind of make a union stuff, sort of, and present it to YouTube? And so they can review all your videos together.
Yeah.
And make it easier for you guys, be able to receive money in that way.
Right.
And the other question that I have is about your lawsuit. How's that thing going?
Okay, good. So Grover, let me address each of these issues, and it's all very good questions, by the way. And let's turn Grover up as much as we can, just so everybody can hear him. So number one, I could go and try to join with some other YouTubers, but the truth is we really don't have leverage over YouTube, and we can't get YouTube to do anything. Even together, 5, 10, 20, 30 progressive YouTubers, we are tiny when it comes to the total YouTube universe. So to do what you're suggesting, Grover, which is a great idea, you need new tech infrastructure. You actually need to build something that would allow that to happen. And it would be very expensive for us to do, and there's no reason whatsoever that YouTube would agree to do it themselves or even to work with us on it, because they just don't need to. That's the truth. That's how big they are.
Okay.
Okay, so sad. I know. I can hear you're bummed out, but it is what it is. Now, as far as the lawsuit goes, you're referring to, we were threatened with a lawsuit
yes,
some time ago, and I mentioned it. We were demanded thousands of dollars, and then I basically said at that point, I'm not going to say much more about it for now, but I hope to one day be able to tell the story. I don't want to say too much, but we are getting very close to being able to tell the story, okay? And I just want to, my understanding is that it's wrapping up. I actually spoke to my lawyer about this today, but until I get the all clear that we can talk about it, I don't want to say anything else, but I will talk about it when I can, Grover.
Last thing I wanted to tell you, H3S3 Production.
Yeah.
They got a lawsuit also. I don't know if you heard about it.
I did.
I mean, I am not a lawyer myself, but you could speak to them. They might be able to help you out with your lawsuit. That's just a reference that I'm giving you.
Yeah, so H3H3, I know Ethan Klein over there, but fortunately, Grover, I would if we needed to, but I think that we're getting beyond the lawsuit thing, so I don't think we need anybody else's help at this time. But yeah, Ethan's a good guy and a good person to speak to. All right, Grover, always great to hear from you. Thank you so much. We are taking calls at 617-830-4750. We are going to go to our next caller from the 774 area code. 774 is always dicey. It's Central Mass. It could be Pat's friends. It could be anybody at 774. But tell us, caller from 774, who are you and what's your question today?
Hey, David. I love your show. I'm Justin from Quincy. I'm volunteering with a group in Massachusetts called People Govern Not Money. It's a local chapter of American Promise, and we're trying to overturn Citizens United, you know, collecting signatures for a ballot initiative in Mass. It would establish a citizens commission that would develop reports on the impact of political and election spending in Mass, and you know, the legal ability of state governments to regulate corporations, and you know, of course, this make the 28th Amendment a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. So I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that, if you support our efforts, and if you do, if maybe you could encourage voters on your show to sign up before our November deadline. Maybe host some kind of event or something like that.
Okay, so listen, Justin, worthy causes. I'm not familiar with your organization, so I would not, nothing I am about to say would be an endorsement or criticism of your organization. I'm just not familiar with it. Here's what I really want to know, because I talked to folks who are collecting. In fact, this weekend, I actually gave a couple signatures for a couple things when I was out and about in Boston. Be as honest with me as you can here, Justin, and I know that you're, you know, in a role where you are working on this project. Do you genuinely think that this signature collection initiative that you're participating in will lead to the overturning of Citizens United? I mean, in your heart of hearts, tell me, because I really do want to understand, because I think it's such a valuable effort, and I support the effort, of course, but I've not ever done the signature collecting thing that you're doing, which is tough, right? I talk to people who do it. Do you genuinely believe the end result will be the overturning of Citizens United?
Well, I do think it's a long road to that. But the good thing about this particular initiative is that it doesn't just focus on overturning Citizens United, is that it also, you know, tries to increase, increase what's shown about contributions in
transparency, contribution transparency.
I'm sorry, what's that?
It increases transparency about political donations.
Transparency.
Yeah.
That's the word I was looking for. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah. Increasing transparency, holding you know, our officials accountable in that sort of way by having a human presence.
Listen, I totally get that. It sounds like a worthy cause, but my question was a different one, which is do you genuinely feel when you're doing this like this is a good use of your limited activism time versus some other thing?
Well, I do think it's a good use of our time, because even if this, I do believe that if we get a bunch of different states on board with us, then this will lead to overturning Citizens United. But even if it doesn't do that, it does increase transparency, like I said, so it has some positive impact.
Okay, very good. And listen, I'm only asking because I've always felt like these are such uphill battles, and I feel bad for people out there in the heat collecting signatures for initiatives that often are just so overwhelming that I think they're going to require some other level of activism, although I couldn't tell you what it is. That's the thing. It's not that I think what Justin's doing is wrong. I don't think what he's doing is pointless, but I genuinely wonder, Pat, you know, it's tough. It's an uphill battle.
Right, exactly. I mean, maybe collecting signatures is a tough task and maybe not the most effective way, but that being said, I don't know what the most effective way is, especially when there's already been court cases on it. It already seems pretty settled right now.
Yeah. All right, Justin, listen, keep up the good work. I hope your work does have an impact, and I completely support the overturning of Citizens United. Of course, I've been clear about that. Thanks for the call. Taking your calls, let's go next to our caller from the 201 area code. Caller from 201, introduce yourself. Tell us what's on your mind today.
David, big fan. I'm John in New Jersey. First-time caller. Got a question for you, buddy.
Okay, go ahead.
After watching the bigoted right-wing religious nut Roy Moore win the Alabama primary yesterday, any possibility of you guys doing an extended piece on the supposed separation of church and state that's purported to exist in the United States?
That's a good topic for a long-form piece. It's not on our list right now, but if the audience demands it, I would have to go with that, because that's a major issue. what really are the limits of that separation, what have been the attempts to break that separation, and what truly was the intent of the framers of the infrastructure of the United States, right, when it comes to separation of church and state. Yeah, I mean, I've not followed Roy Moore super closely. I know that he's a religious right dude, but is there something in particular he's doing that's sort of anti-separation of church and state?
You might recall he's the guy he's the Ten Commandments guy. He's got
he said that the First
courthouse.
Amendment only protects Christians, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Not exactly strict separation of church and state, I would say.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Thanks, David.
All right. Thanks very much, John. Appreciate the call. Yeah, Roy Moore, right. Ten Commandments guy and the entire thing. We got to do a piece on that. I like that idea. Okay. Let's try our next caller from the 918 area code. Caller from 918. Tell us your name and what's on your mind today.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
All right. Ben from Oklahoma.
Great.
And my question is for both you and Pat.
Mm-hmm.
It's favorite band or artist and favorite movie.
Oh, geez. I mean, this is for me is like when someone asks me, what's your favorite book? It's like, you know, if you read regularly, you couldn't possibly have a favorite book. You'd have to tell me genre or from the last X number of years or something like that. I mean, I like so many bands and so many movies. Do you have like a favorite band or movie, Pat?
For band, I would go with like Red Hot Chili Peppers, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's
controversial.
Huge. That's major.
Movie, I'm not too much of a movie buff. Maybe we'll go with like Back to the Future.
Back to the Future.
Not bad, right?
Huh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, I mean, the last, this is crazy, but the last movie I saw in a movie theater was episode 7 of Star Wars. And I think it's been 2 years since I've been to the movies. I just really don't go to the movies. I don't have much time. But bands, I mean, my musical interests are so diverse. Everything from, you know, Led Zeppelin and other 70s rock all the way through Argentinian alternative and reggae bands. You know, I mean, I couldn't say my favorite band.
Beatles or the Rolling Stones?
Oh, I'm a big Beatles over the Stones. I've never been a Stones guy, really. I'd much rather the Beatles. Huge Beatles fan over Stones for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Will you be checking out the Frank Zappa hologram tour?
I will not.
That's
Thank you for checking with me about that, Pat. But no, you can put that. It's. I would say not even cross it off my list. It's never been on my list. Okay. Let's try our caller from the 714 area code. Caller from 714, tell us your name and where you're calling from and what's on your mind today.
Hey, my name is Laura. I'm in Orange County, California. I was wondering what you think about this story from the Washington Post. It says that non-citizens can now vote in College Park, Maryland. And my follow-up to that is, why do so many people on the left think that voter ID laws are racist?
Well, there's a couple different things in there. The first story you mentioned, I've not seen, so I would not be able to comment on it because I've not seen that story. But I'll look into it, Laura. Your second question was, why do so many people on the left believe that voter ID laws are racist? So let's expand on that a little bit. Like, who specifically are you talking about, and what have they said?
I'm talking about people on CNN. I'm talking about the ACLU. Having a legal battle with the state of Texas, saying that the requirement that you show ID is such a horrible thing. It's so difficult for people to show ID before voting. But people show ID to buy alcohol and to go to the movies.
Now, Laura, you first said that there were people on the left saying that voter ID is racist, but now you're saying that the ACLU is saying that it's difficult for people to show ID. So those are two different arguments, right? Who on CNN said voter ID is racist?
Well, it's a talking point that I've heard on CNN.
But from who?
Probably Don Lemon.
You probably heard on CNN from Don Lemon that voter ID is racist. Okay.
Or one of the people he was interviewing.
Oh, so it wasn't Don Lemon who said it. It was somebody else.
It was his program, but it was, you know.
So it was a guest's opinion, you're saying. Okay. So listen, here's the thing, Laura. A lot of this kind of gets wrapped up in semantics, right? Where if we say something is racist or something disproportionately impacts people who are members of a particular race. So a lot of it gets wrapped up in the sort of semantics of it. But here's my view on the entire voter ID thing, right? Because at face value, you're right. Listen, you show ID to buy alcohol. You show ID to prove you're old enough to get into a rated R movie. What about showing an ID to get into vote? The problem I have is the following. It's not that showing ID is a difficult task, but the issue is that so-called free voter IDs aren't really free, in the sense that depending on where you live and depending on what your family background is or was in terms of economic situation and other factors, in order to get a so-called voter ID, you might have to travel. You might have to travel, and there are costs associated with that. And not only that, once you get to where you need to get the voter ID, you might be required to show documents to get the voter ID that are not free documents to obtain. And if you've had, for example, anything from housing instability to parental instability or any other number of sort of issues throughout your life, you would not have those documents, and then you would also have to pay to obtain those documents. And in addition to that, the people who would most have trouble getting time off from their job during what we would call business hours, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, are disproportionately economically disadvantaged people, which in our country happen to be more likely to be not white. So it's very easy to just say there's nothing racist about saying show me an ID, but when you actually go through the mechanics in the large numbers of, well, what does it mean to get a so-called free ID? You can see how it would disproportionately impact members of a certain race. So whether you call it racist or not is sort of, it's a semantic argument, but do you sort of understand the path I'm walking through here?
Yeah, I get it. I guess there'd be obstacles to obtaining the ID. Right.
Yes. All right, Laura. Well, listen, I hope that my comments have been helpful to you. I really, really appreciate the call. We will take a break, and then we will continue with more of your calls after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Let's jump back on the phones. A lot of people holding. 617-830-4750 is the number. All right, let's go back to the phones and try our next caller from the 864 area code. Caller from 864, can you hear me? What's on your mind today?
Hi. Basically, I had two precursors to my question.
Wow.
First, the definition of terrorism, when you Google it on dictionary.com, is the use of violence and threats to intimidate and coerce, especially for political purposes. And also, we know for a fact that the war on drugs was specifically started for political means, and they have used coercion, violence, and threats for decades. Is this somehow not a form of terrorism in itself?
Yeah, I've heard this argued before, and I guess we can slice and dice the definition of terrorism a number of different ways. Another popular way to frame this sort of same terrorism definition debate is, are any military actions by a country in some way, shape, or form terrorism? Because they often use violence and are meant to have sort of political outcomes or repercussions. My question to you would be this. What difference would it make practically? In other words, we know the racist origins of the war on drugs. We know its disproportionate racial impact, economic impact on poor people. We know about uneven policing based on poor neighborhoods and rich neighborhoods. And we know about how the war on drugs as it exists was sort of a reaction to the Civil Rights Act of the 1960s. So what would change if we said, hey, you know what? It is a form of terrorism.
Well, honestly, I would like us to adapt what is going on in Portugal, where they have decriminalized, and actually the World Health Organization has suggested to the U.S. to decriminalize as well.
Okay, no, I agree with that, but hold on a second. Let's walk through it piece by piece if we can. Let's say we agree that the war on drugs is a form of terrorism. What impact would that have on any of our policy?
Well, it could help to push to stop the war on drugs. That's what I think our goal would be in pushing for it.
Would it though? Because has talking about American foreign policy abroad as terrorism in some circles changed American foreign policy abroad?
No.
No. Yeah, so I'm just not sure. I mean, I think it's a very interesting academic question, and I'm not, to be clear, I'm not writing it off as a silly question, right? I think it's interesting. When we look at the actual definition of terrorism, it's sometimes easy to forget how much of what happens domestically, or even that the U.S. is involved in internationally, could arguably fall under that definition. I just am unsure about what it will help us accomplish.
We just don't call it that.
Okay. All right. Well, interesting question. I would just encourage you to think about, if we want to focus on that, we should really be sure that it will help us get to a political outcome that we want. And if it won't, it might not be the best use of our time. Thanks for the call. Really appreciate it. Very, very interesting topic. Let's go to a caller from Skype. Anytime we take calls from Skype, it can be a little bit risky. I don't know why that is, but it sometimes is. Skype caller, please tell us who you are and what's on your mind today.
Is this me you can hear right now?
Yes, it is.
Hey, my name's Addison. I'm from the UK. And I was just wondering what your thoughts are on the increased Twitter limit character count.
Yeah, so for people who don't know,
as foreign piracy.
For some users, the limit will go from 140 characters to 280. Although, you know what, Addison? I've not yet read for which users. Like, how will it be determined?
Yeah, so I think they're just beta testing it at the moment with selected users that have high follower counts, and then eventually it's going to roll out to everybody.
Got it. Okay. Listen, I don't really care about the Twitter character limit in the sort of abstract. I think from a practical perspective, Twitter wars with 140 characters are pretty pointless. Like, I've never seen anyone convinced or had a big epiphany to re-examine their political philosophy because of a 140 character message that they received on Twitter. So if doubling it to 280 allows for maybe more substantive discussion, I'm all for it. I just don't know if it will, Addison. I think it'll just be 280 characters with which people can call me a Jew cuck instead of 140, you know?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's probably going to be the same. It hardly won't make a difference.
Yeah. Now, eventually, if you keep increasing the character count, like I do think that there is something, whether you like 140 characters or not, that was sort of the big thing with Twitter, right? That's what differentiates it from other platforms where you can write longer messages. So I do wonder if this is an attempt by Twitter to try to do something that seems sort of radical, and it would be in their world because it's been 140 characters for so long, but it will actually make Twitter less distinguishable from other social platforms if you can write longer messages, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I saw on the blog post that they made about it that they had a sort of an emotional attachment to it, but that wasn't really a good reason to sort of hang on to it anymore.
No,
and I think the main reason they did it was they said a lot of countries where you have characters instead of letters, they were able to fit pretty much everything they wanted to say, like Chinese characters and things like that, and they hardly ever hit the character count limit. Whereas in the English-speaking or letters countries, people would often hit the character count. So that sort of made more sense.
That's more logical to me than an emotional attachment, for sure. But I do think that there is sort of marketing value tied up in 140 characters. All right, Addison, thanks so much for the call. Where in the UK are you?
I'm in Sheffield at the moment. Thank you very much for taking my call.
All right. Appreciate it very much. Hope to hear from you again. Let's stay with the phones. Let's go next to our caller from the 856 area code. Caller from 856. Tell us who you are and what's on your mind today.
Hi there. My name is Jinsun. I'm from Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and I wanted to ask Dave. The conservatives love to attack progressive people. Hey, you're spending money on military, but at what point, if you are against it, they like to attack you if you're not patriotic. So how do progressives say, like, hey, we're spending way too much on money, but we're doing this out of patriotism, that we don't think it's a good idea to constantly increase the budget to go to the military and industrial complex?
Yeah, well, so I think it's very important to make it clear that just throwing money at the military is not an act of patriotism, and in the same way that money can be used in productive or unproductive ways In every other instance on this planet, just adding more money to the military does not guarantee that we're actually going to have better national security outcomes. It doesn't really guarantee anything. So we need to be thinking a little bit more critically about how the money is being used. But I think there's another aspect to this, right? Which is that there's this irrational assignment of so-called patriotism to having the biggest possible military. But we need to sort of change the discourse and point out that actually what's really patriotic is valuing the service of those in the military so much that the criticism or critical analysis of when we use the military is one of the most patriotic things that we can do. Anybody can sign off on a piece of paper to dump billions of dollars on the military, but there's nothing objectively patriotic about that. In fact, it's sort of a blind action that doesn't really, it's a reflexive action that requires no thinking. More patriotic would be, hey, we are lucky enough to have an all-volunteer army. We don't need the draft because so many people are willing to say, hey, I don't have to, but I'm going to choose to serve in the military. And the most patriotic thing we can do is to really critically think about when we put troops in harm's way, whether it's actually a good use of that military service that has been volunteered and not demanded. And of course, implicit in that is thinking about all the other areas in which money could be used, right? What's more patriotic, funding an even bigger military or making sure that everybody can have a basic level of healthcare, for example, such that people can actually work in the field that's their passion, not stick around in some lame job because they don't want to lose their health insurance. So we need to reframe the debate on patriotism, and it's sadly become a debate that the right has had sort of a monopoly on, but the entire thing's got to be rebuilt from the ground up.
Okay. All right, Dave. Yeah, I love your show, and I actually think I'm going to sign up to be one of your members.
All right. Very good. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the call. Thank you so much to all of our callers. We will take a break. Audience questions coming up. Stay with us on the Friday show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Let's get to audience questions for the week. First one from Felicia. Felicia says, hey, David, you seem to read quite a bit. I've been out of reading for a long time. What are some books you would recommend that would get people back into reading? Depends on whether you're talking fiction or nonfiction. It depends on the genre also. If for nonfiction, find an area that you're curious about and see what the top books are in that under that topic of nonfiction, and just grab one or two. That would be my recommendation. For fiction, it really depends on the genre, right? I mean, if you like science fiction, I would say get some Arthur C. Clarke books. 2001: A Space Odyssey is a good one to start with. Philip K. Dick, endless books by Philip K. Dick. If you're interested in time travel type stuff, I really like the 2-book series by Connie Willis, Blackout followed by All Clear, Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. That's newer sci-fi that I think is good. Those are some options. There's really endless options. If you're into or want to explore cyberpunk, which is sort of a subset of science fiction, I say start with Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash, or maybe Neuromancer by William Gibson. That's a good option. If you want to try something more classic and maybe like a darker crime fiction type of thing, I really like Raymond Chandler, Eric Ambler, and Agatha Christie has a very, very long list of books that would be great. Spy fiction, one of my favorite authors is John Le Carré, of course, the pen name of David Cornwell. Cornwell or Cornwell? I forget now. Anyway, John Le Carré, everything from Spy Who Came In From the Cold, The Constant Gardener, The Tailor of Panama. He just has a new book out, which I bought but haven't read yet. He is an absolute classic author. And if you're looking for like an exciting page-turner, I really like Robert Ludlum's Bourne trilogy, which was eventually turned into the movies with Matt Damon, the Bourne Identity, the Bourne Supremacy, and the Bourne Ultimatum, or I don't remember exactly what they were, but the original books, there's been a ton of books written with the Bourne character, but I'm talking about Robert Ludlum's original 3. And then lastly, if you like historical fiction, I like Alan Furst, F-U-R-S-T. He lived in Paris for quite some time, and he writes really great historical fiction taking place. A lot of the stories take place in France, but some of them are in Spain, some of them are in Poland and different places during mostly the Second World War, and really, really good historical fiction. So it really depends on the genre.
Wow, okay, so it sounds like the person writing in is trying to get back into reading.
Yes.
So with some of those suggestions, are they maybe shorter books, maybe easy reads? Because they're trying to get themselves acclimated, you see?
I think that they are all, if you choose the right genre and story for you, whether it's long or short, it should suck you in.
Okay.
I think that people who are just looking for a short book to get back in, look for a book where the story appeals to you.
Well, I was thinking, maybe go back to some of the books that you read in high school or college that were absolute page turners for you.
Yeah.
And if it's been a little while, you can reread those and still, have the same excitement that you had the first time around.
Yeah. Like
and that
what,
may ease you back
1984?
into it. Something like that, maybe one of those dystopian novels.
I've not gone back to Beowulf. I did not enjoy Beowulf when I was 14, and I don't know if I want to go back to Beowulf. But 1984, I have reread, and Fahrenheit 451, I've reread, in the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, I'm wrapping up Brave New World right now.
Oh,
I would
that's
also,
a classic. Yeah.
I would recommend maybe Kurt Vonnegut.
Oh, yeah,
Because,
yeah.
I mean, I love his storytelling style. I mean, the fact that a narrator can just introduce themselves as one of the characters halfway through the book is phenomenal to me. And it has pictures.
Can't go wrong with pictures. Sure, that'll smooth the transition from comic books into books. That's always a good recommendation from producer Pat there to make that transition really smooth. Okay, there's some ideas. There's endless books to read, right? I mean, my list of books I'd like to read is over 100 long right now, and I've got 3 on my nightstand. So it's an uphill battle. Connie wrote in, different countries are known for different things. This is not a which country is better thing, but what does your birth country of Argentina get right compared to other countries? Well, nobody can do corruption like Argentina. Argentina really does all sorts of political corruption and institutional corruption really, really well. I would say asado, or what is known as, the barbecuing and grilling of various meats, is absolutely top-notch in Argentina. The pasta and the pizza, I mean, a lot of the food is really great in Argentina. Empanadas are fantastic. Pastries are excellent because of the French influence. Heavy on the butter, not for vegans for sure. Sarcasm is absolutely top-notch in Argentina. If you've met Argentinians and have spoken to them in mostly any setting, you would know sarcasm is a really, really big thing down there. Interestingly, software development is quite good in Argentina. Yeah, there's a lot of software development companies that are based in Argentina that work with companies in the US and Europe at a lower cost because of the lower cost of living there. So that, I think, is a thing Argentina gets right. Psychotherapy. The capital city in Argentina of Buenos Aires at one point had the highest concentration of psychotherapists per capita, up there with, I believe, New York City. So that's something I think we could say Argentina gets right. Those are a few things. Not all of these are good things.
That's pretty exciting. I don't know what you want me to add to all this.
Well, do those things sound like it would be an interesting place to visit? Or when you hear that Argentina really knows how to do corruption, does that make you think, maybe it's not the place for me?
I mean, as a traveler, maybe I'll be less susceptible to being a victim of corruption.
Yeah.
But there's so much natural beauty I hear around there. And also Buenos Aires sounds like a phenomenal city to me.
Yeah, it is. And actually, it's good that Pat is mentioning that. If you're looking for a variety of beautiful landscapes, everything from arid, higher elevation, desert-like, pre-tropical, all the way down to effectively Antarctic weather. You can get it all. Glaciers, mountains, the entire thing. I think that's one of the pluses of Argentina.
Maybe work for their tourism industry.
Sure. There's always a need for English-speaking people to work in the tourism industry. So anyway, I hope that these aren't seen as all bad things, because there's really a lot of great stuff in Argentina. Roxy wrote in, you seem to be non-reactive during interviews on your show, no matter what crazy stuff the guest says. But are there things people say to you in casual or personal conversations that are sort of like conversation stoppers? Well, it's not so much that I'm going to fly off the handle in a rage, but if I'm having a casual conversation with someone and they casually refer to something as faggy or retarded, I pretty instantly say, I'm no longer interested in this conversation.
So you try to wrap it up as soon as you can, but sometimes you can't really do that.
No, you can.
Yeah.
I've done it even in situations where it seems like it might be rude, and it might have been. But as soon as you drop that in, I kind of am. I mean, I just have no interest in speaking to you whatsoever. If you casual. And the other day, actually, when I was at a Billy Joel concert, this is not going to reflect well, actually, on Bostonians. And we know that there's significant racism and homophobia in Boston, despite being on paper a very progressive city. I was standing there in line waiting to get a $12 bottle of water, and someone behind me was also waiting in line, and someone they recognize comes by and says, "Hey, Jim," or whatever the guy's name was. "So nice to see you here." "Yeah, so nice to see you. Yeah, you know, we were going to, by the way," it must have been like a coworker situation. I don't know what. Okay. And the woman asks the guy behind me, Jim, where's Steve? And he goes, "Oh, no, I'm sorry. The guy asks the woman, "Where's Steve?" And the woman says, "Oh, he said he had to watch his kids," or something like that. And the guy goes, "Oh, tell him he's a faggot." And immediately I'm like, this is just not anyone I would want to be around. It's just toxic. And why do you want to be around people like this? And the woman seemed to sort of cringe, like this is not really the right way to be talking about people. But when someone drops that in casual conversation, I just want to walk away.
Yeah, no, I do understand that. There are those certain words you just want to not hear, or I guess move beyond whenever you hear them in conversation.
I agree.
I more think about like, when you check out something from like a cafe, and it seems like the barista just wants to have this small talk with you.
Oh, you don't like
do you engage in that, or do you just try to rush through it?
I tend to not do the small talk thing. There is a cafe I go to with some frequency for meetings where there's this particular barista who doesn't recognize me. It's not like they're talking to me because they recognize me as a frequent person, because I don't go that often. And they'll always say, it's not just like a, "Hey, how's it going?" And you say, "Fine, whatever."
It's a little bit more.
You know that convention?
Yeah.
It's, "How's your day going today so far?" And the way it's asked is more like, wow, I'm expected to like really give an answer. And I kind of am flummoxed because I'm used to that kind of annoying convention of you say, "Oh, I'm doing well, how are you?" And then the other person says, "Oh, I'm also doing well." And it communicates nothing because no one's really telling the truth, but it's just, this is what you say. So in a way, it's refreshing because they're genuinely asking, "How is your day going today? And what makes it a good day or not a good day?" So I wouldn't call that a conversation stopper. It might just be a conversation I'm not prepared for usually.
Okay. Well, I mean, I want to move beyond just saying good in you when someone asks me, "How are you?"
Yeah.
But sometimes on the spot, it's hard to express in the right adjectives how I'm feeling that particular
My
day.
move is I'll pretend to think about it and then say, "It's actually a pretty good day. I'm doing pretty well today." And it's just a slightly different, it's the same answer, but it's slightly different wording. So it seems like you've really put some thought into it.
Yeah. And unfortunately, sometimes you could be feeling pretty down, pretty tired,
absolutely.
And you don't want to ruin their mood.
A good way to clear a room, if you need to, is you just say, "Contagious," I asked the doctor. "Really contagious," he told me. "Do not go out in public." That's a way to end everybody's conversation and clear a room if you find yourself needing to. And I know often you find yourself needing to clear a room.
I mean, hey, if there's a lot of people in that restaurant or wherever you're at, you want to get your food as quickly as you can. Yeah. That's the right move.
If you want to clear out a restaurant, you talk about a mouse or a rat. Believe me, that gets people very, very nervous, and then they leave. Don't use faggy or retarded. Come on. It's 2017, folks. Let's talk about what's on the bonus show today. Do we know what's on the bonus show today? I am not going to tell you what's on the bonus show today because I'm out of time. But believe me, folks, it's a fantastic bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.